The crystal palace on Helios Prime stood tall against the purple sky. Inside its shining walls, Emperor Vextar sat on his throne, watching the busy servants below. His dark eyes followed every movement in the great hall. The emperor had ruled for 300 years, and he knew many things about many species. But humans still puzzled him. Humans were strange creatures. They cried when they were happy. They laughed when they were scared. They helped others even when it hurt them. Other species in his empire made sense. The rock people of Titan were strong and practical. The bird people of Arrow were quick and smart. The water people of Neptune were calm and wise. But humans, they were different. Vextar had been watching one human family for months. Huna was the head maid in his palace. She had worked for him for 15 years, always doing her job well. She never complained, never asked for more money, never tried to steal anything. Her older daughter, Jiwan, worked in the kitchens. The girl was quiet, but made the best bread in the palace. Her younger daughter, Minji, was only 8 years old. She went to the palace school during the day and helped her mother in the evenings. Today, Minji was bringing him his dinner. She walked carefully across the marble floor, holding the silver tray with both hands. Her small feet made soft sounds on the stone. She wore the simple blue dress that all servant children wore. Her black hair was tied back with a white ribbon. "Your dinner, Your Majesty," Minji said with a small bow. Vextar took the tray without looking at her. This was normal. Emperors did not speak to servant children, but he was always watching, always thinking. What made humans act the way they did? What made them different from every other species in his empire? An idea came to him. A test. He would see what this human child would really do when she thought no one was watching. Would she be kind? Would she be greedy? Would she run away? Or would she show her true nature? That evening, after all the servants went to their rooms, Vextar went to his private chambers. He had a plan. He would pretend to be sick, maybe even pretend to faint. Then he would see how the human child reacted. His telepathic powers would let him know what she was really thinking. The next morning, Minji came to his chambers with breakfast, as usual. Vextar lay on the floor near his bed, pretending to be unconscious. His breathing was slow and shallow. His eyes were closed. To anyone looking, he would seem very sick or hurt. Minji pushed open the heavy door. She saw the emperor on the floor and dropped the breakfast tray. The plates crashed against the marble, and food scattered everywhere. But she did not run. She did not scream. Instead, she rushed to his side. "Your Majesty?" she whispered. "Are you okay?" Vextar kept his eyes closed and his body still. Through his telepathic senses, he could feel her worry. It was real worry, not fake concern. She was truly scared for him. Minji looked around the room. She saw no one else. She could have run to get help right away. She could have looked through his things. She could have taken some of the gold items on his desk. But she did none of these things. Instead, she gently touched his forehead to check if he had a fever. Her small hand was cool and soft. She saw a pillow on his bed and carefully lifted his head to put the pillow underneath. Then she took a blanket from his bed and covered him up to his chest. "There," she said quietly. "That should be more comfortable." Vextar was surprised. This was not what he expected. Most adults would have run for help immediately. Most children would have been too scared to touch him. But this little human girl was taking care of him like he was her own family. Minji sat down on the floor beside him. She looked at his face with worried eyes. "I hope you're not too sick," she said. "My mother says you work very hard. Maybe you just need to rest." Then something even more unexpected happened. Minji began to talk to him. She told him about her day yesterday. She talked about her lessons at school. She mentioned a funny thing her sister Jiwan had said at dinner. She spoke about the new flowers growing in the palace garden. Her voice was gentle and calm. She was not trying to wake him up. She was just keeping him company. Vextar had never experienced anything like this. In 300 years of ruling, no one had ever just sat with him and talked about simple, everyday things. "You know," Minji continued, "my grandmother used to sing to me when I was scared or sick. She said music could heal hearts. Would you like me to sing to you? Without waiting for an answer that she knew would not come, Minji began to sing. It was a soft, sweet song in an old human language. Vextar did not understand the words, but he could feel the meaning through her emotions. It was a song about home, about love, about being safe. Through his telepathic abilities, Vextar sensed something he had never felt before. The child's mind was full of pure kindness. She was not thinking about herself at all. She was only worried about him. There was no greed, no fear, no desire for reward, just simple, honest care for another being. 2 hours passed. Minji stayed with him the whole time. She talked softly, sang quietly, and once even tried to fix his blanket when it slipped. Finally, she seemed to decide that she needed to get help. "I should probably tell someone you're sick," she said. "But I didn't want to leave you alone. Everyone needs someone with them when they don't feel good." She stood up and walked to the door. But before leaving, she came back and knelt beside him one more time. "I hope you feel better soon, Your Majesty," she whispered. "The Empire needs you, but more than that, I think you need to take care of yourself too." Then she ran out to find help. Vextar lay there in shock. His test had failed completely. He had expected to see human greed or human weakness. Instead, he had discovered something that made him question everything he thought he knew about humans. This child had shown him kindness that was completely selfless. She had cared for him simply because he needed care, not because she wanted anything in return. When the palace guards arrived, Vextar continued to pretend. But inside, his mind was spinning with new questions. If an 8-year-old human could show such pure compassion, what did that mean about humans as a species? And what did it mean about him as a ruler? The palace doctors came quickly when Minji called for help. They examined Vextar carefully, checking his breathing and his heartbeat. They could not find anything wrong with him, but they said he needed rest. The doctors left medicines and told everyone to let the emperor sleep. Vextar continued his pretense. He lay still in his bed, eyes closed, listening to everything around him. The doctors visited twice a day. The palace guard stood outside his door. But what surprised him most was that Minji kept coming back. Every morning she brought his breakfast. Even though he could not eat it, she still arranged the food nicely on the table beside his bed. She would pull a chair close to him and sit down. "Good morning, Your Majesty," she would say softly. "I hope you slept well." Then she would talk to him about her day. She told him about her school lessons. Yesterday she learned about different planets in the galaxy. She was excited to know that there were people living on worlds made of ice and worlds covered in red sand. Teacher Bora said that on the ice planet, people build houses from frozen water, Minji explained. "Isn't that amazing? I wish I could see that someday." Through his telepathic powers, Vextar could feel her genuine wonder and curiosity. She was not just making conversation. She really wanted to share these discoveries with him. She thought he would be interested in hearing about them. On the second day, Minji brought something new. She carried a small book in her hands along with the breakfast tray. "I brought you a story," she said, settling into her chair. "My mother reads to me when I'm sick. She says stories can take you to other places when your body needs to stay in bed." She opened the book and began to read. It was a human fairy tale about a brave princess who saved her kingdom by being kind to a dragon. Minji read slowly, making sure to pronounce each word clearly. Sometimes she would stop to explain something. "Dragons in human stories are usually scary," she said. "But this dragon was just lonely. Sometimes when people seem mean, they're really just sad inside." Vextar found himself actually listening to the story. In all his years as emperor, no one had ever read to him just for pleasure. Official reports, yes. Important documents, yes. But never a simple story meant to bring joy. When Minji finished the story, she closed the book gently. "I liked that story because it shows that kindness is stronger than fear," she said. "Do you think that's true, Your Majesty?" She asked the question as if she expected an answer, even though she knew he could not respond. It made Vextar realize that she was treating him like a real person, not just a sick emperor. She was sharing her thoughts with him the way she might with a friend. On the third day, something changed. Minji's older sister, Jiwon, came with her. The 16-year-old girl was more serious than her younger sister, but she was equally kind. "I brought you better soup," Jiwon said quietly, placing a bowl on the bedside table. "The kitchen soup is good, but this has extra vegetables. Mother taught me that good food helps people get well faster." Jiwon did not stay long like Minji did. She was busy with her work in the kitchen, but she came by 3 times that day to check on him and bring fresh soup. Their mother, Hyuna, also began spending more time in his room. She cleaned more carefully than usual, dusting every surface twice. She changed his blankets every day instead of every few days. She brought fresh flowers for his room and opened the windows to let in clean air. "Fresh air is important for healing," Hyuna said to herself as she worked. "And flowers bring life to a room." Vexitar watched all of this through half-closed eyes. The family was taking special care of him. They believed he was truly sick, and they were doing everything they could to help him feel better. But there was something else. Through his telepathic abilities, he could sense their emotions. They were not just doing their jobs. They were genuinely worried about him as a person. On the 4th day, Minji brought colored paper and scissors. "I thought you might be bored," she explained. "My grandmother taught me how to make paper flowers. I could teach you when you wake up. For now, I'll make some for your room." She sat beside his bed for 2 hours, carefully folding and cutting the paper. She made roses, lilies, and butterflies. Her small fingers worked with great care, trying to make each one perfect. When she finished, she placed them around his room. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now your room has more color. Color makes people feel happier." That evening, Vexitar heard Hyuna talking to her daughters in the hallway outside his room. They thought their voices were too quiet for him to hear, but his enhanced senses caught every word. "How is the Emperor today?" Hyuna asked. "The same," Minji said sadly. "He still won't wake up. But I keep talking to him. Teacher Bora says that sick people can sometimes hear us even when they can't answer." "Are you sure you should spend so much time in there?" Jiwon asked. "What if someone says you're bothering him?" "I'm not bothering him," Minji replied firmly. "Everyone needs someone to care about them, even emperors, especially emperors. They have to make hard decisions all day. That must be very lonely." Vexitar felt something strange in his chest. It was an emotion he had not felt in many years. The human child understood something that his own advisors never had. Being an emperor was lonely. Having power meant that everyone wanted something from you. No one ever cared about you just because you were a person who might need kindness. But this family did. They cared about him not because he was their emperor, but because he was a living being who seemed to be suffering. Their compassion was not based on his power or his wealth. It was based on simple human decency. On the 5th day, Minji brought her mother's guitar. "Mother said I could borrow this," she explained. "I don't play very well yet, but I know a few songs. Music helped me when I was sick last year." She played simple melodies, sometimes making mistakes and laughing softly at herself, but her intention was pure. She was trying to comfort him in the only ways she knew how. As Vexitar lay there listening to the imperfect but heartfelt music, he realized that his test had revealed something completely unexpected. He had wanted to see what humans would do when they thought no one was watching. What he discovered was that humans could show incredible kindness even when there was no benefit to themselves. The family was sacrificing their time, their food, and their energy to care for someone who could not thank them. They were doing it simply because it was the right thing to do. This was not weakness. This was a kind of strength that Vexitar had never seen in any other species in his empire. And for the first time in 300 years, the emperor began to question whether he truly understood what it meant to be strong. By the end of the first week, word had spread throughout the palace that the emperor was seriously ill. The news created worry among all the palace workers. Some were concerned about their jobs. Others wondered who would rule if something happened to him. But the human family's reaction was different from everyone else's. Vexitar noticed that Hyuna had started working extra hours without being asked. She cleaned the imperial chambers 3 times a day instead of once. She washed his blankets in special herbs that were supposed to help with healing. She even brought a small plant from her own room and placed it by his window. Plants clean the air, she explained to Minji one morning. They also bring peaceful energy to a room. Jiwon began bringing him special meals that she cooked in secret. The kitchen staff was already preparing food for the sick emperor, but Jiwon made extra dishes with ingredients from her own small garden. She grew herbs behind the servants' quarters, and she used them to make tea and soup that she believed would help him recover. This tea helped our neighbor when he was sick, Jiwon told Minji as she left a steaming cup by his bedside. The herbs are good for strength. What moved Vextar most was that the family was sharing their own food with him. Through his enhanced hearing, he learned that they were eating smaller portions at their own meals so they could give him the best parts of their food. They thought the palace kitchen was not taking proper care of him. Minji continued her daily visits, but now she brought new activities. One day she brought a puzzle and worked on it while sitting beside his bed. She explained each piece as she placed it. "This piece is part of the sky," she said, holding up a blue fragment. "And this one is part of a tree. When you put them together, they make a beautiful picture. I think people are like puzzle pieces too. We all fit together to make something bigger." Another day, she brought drawing paper and colored pencils. She drew pictures of the palace garden, of her family, and of different planets she had learned about in school. She left each drawing on his desk. "These are for you to look at when you wake up," she explained. "So you'll have something pretty to see." But the most touching moment came on the 10th day. Minji arrived looking sad and worried. She sat in her usual chair but did not speak for a long time. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, "I heard some people talking. They said you might not wake up. They said you might die." Vextar felt her fear through his telepathic connection. It was pure, honest terror at the thought of losing someone she cared about. "I don't want you to die," Minji continued, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. "I know I'm just a servant's daughter and you're the emperor of the whole galaxy. I know you probably don't even know my name. But I care about you, not because you're the emperor, just because you're you." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I've been thinking about what I would say if you could hear me. I want you to know that you don't have to be perfect all the time. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone needs help sometimes. And everyone deserves to have people who care about them, not because of what they can do, but just because they exist." This simple speech from an 8-year-old child shook Vextar to his core. Through 3 centuries of rule, no one had ever spoken to him with such honest emotion. His advisors told him what he wanted to hear. His subjects feared him too much to be genuine. His fellow rulers saw him only as an ally or an enemy, but this child saw him as a person who needed compassion. The family's behavior was beginning to affect others in the palace. Other human servants noticed how much extra time and care the family was putting into helping the emperor. Some began following their example. They brought flowers from the garden without being asked. They spoke more quietly in the halls so they would not disturb his rest. They worked extra hours to make sure everything in the palace was perfect while he was sick. But it was not just the human servants. The alien workers also began to take notice. Kortha, a rock person who maintained the palace structure, started checking the emperor's room twice a day to make sure the temperature was comfortable. Zena, a bird person who managed communications, began playing soft music in the corridors near his chambers. The most surprising change came from Captain Nexus, the Emperor's chief security officer. Nexus was from a warrior species that valued strength above all else. But he approached Huna one evening with an unusual request. "The human child spends much time with the Emperor," Nexus said in his formal way. "I have been watching to ensure his safety, but I have observed something. The Emperor's vital signs are more stable when the child is present. Her company appears to have a healing effect." Yuna nodded. "Minji has always been good with sick people. She has a gentle heart." "I wish to understand this," Nexus continued. "In my species we heal through strength and force, but the child heals through, what would you call it?" "Love," Yuna said simply. She heals through love and kindness. Nexus was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps my species has been wrong about healing. Word of the conversation spread among the palace staff. For the first time, representatives from different species began talking about human approaches to care and healing. The rock people wanted to know about the herbs G1 was using. The bird people were curious about the songs Minji sang. The water people asked about the stories she read. Dr. Valen, the Emperor's chief physician, noticed the changes too. He was from a highly advanced species that relied on technology for everything. But he began observing the human family's methods with scientific interest. Fascinating, he told his assistant one day. The Emperor's stress hormones decrease significantly when the human child is present. Her emotional state seems to directly influence his physical recovery. There is something here that our medical technology cannot measure. Meanwhile, Minji continued her routine, unaware that her simple acts of kindness were changing the entire palace culture. She read stories, made paper crafts, brought drawings, and sang songs. Every day, she told Vextar about what was happening in the palace, about her lessons, about her hopes and dreams. I've been learning about different kinds of government in school, she told him one day. Teacher Bora says that some leaders rule through fear, and others rule through respect. I think you rule through respect. People work hard for you because they believe you care about doing what's right. Vexatar realized that this child understood leadership better than most of his trained advisors. She saw past his power to the responsibility he carried. She recognized that being an emperor meant serving others, not just controlling them. As his fake illness entered its second week, Vextar began to understand that his test had failed in the most profound way possible. He had not discovered human weakness. Instead, he had uncovered a strength so powerful that it was transforming his entire palace. The family's simple compassion was teaching other species new ways of caring for one another. But more than that, their kindness was changing him. For the first time in centuries, he was experiencing what it felt like to be cared for without conditions, without expectations, without fear. And he was beginning to realize that this feeling was something his empire desperately needed. On the 15th day of his pretended illness, everything changed. An emergency alarm rang through the palace halls. A group of visiting diplomats from the Outer Rim had been poisoned during a state dinner. It was a serious diplomatic crisis that required the Emperor's immediate attention. Dr. Valen burst into Vextar's chambers with 3 medical assistants. Your Majesty, he said urgently, I know you are still recovering, but there is a situation that only you can handle. The Kepler delegation is dying, and they are blaming us for an assassination attempt. Vextar knew he had no choice. The crisis was too important to ignore. He opened his eyes and sat up in bed, pretending to be weak but determined. Help me to the council chambers, he said, his voice hoarse from not speaking for so long. The doctors were amazed by his sudden recovery, but there was no time to ask questions. Within minutes, Vextar was in the emergency council meeting, dealing with the diplomatic crisis. His mind was sharp, his decisions were quick, and within 3 hours he had resolved the situation. The poisoning turned out to be an accident caused by a food allergy, not an assassination attempt. But as the emergency ended, Vextar faced a different problem. His advisors were suspicious about his miraculous recovery. They gathered in his private office after the council meeting. Your Majesty, said Chief Advisor Mortex, your recovery is remarkable. Dr. Valen said yesterday that you might not survive the week. Today you handled a complex diplomatic crisis with perfect clarity. How is this possible? Vextar looked at his 3 most trusted advisors. These were beings he had worked with for decades. Mortex was from a highly logical species that valued truth above all else. General Corax was from a warrior race that respected strength. Dr. Valen was from a scientific civilization that believed in facts and evidence. He decided to tell them the truth. There was no illness, Vextar said calmly. I was conducting an experiment. I wanted to test the nature of humans, specifically the servant family of Huna. I pretended to be unconscious to see how they would behave when they thought no one was watching. The three advisors stared at him in shock. Mortex was the first to speak. You deceived your entire palace for 2 weeks? For an experiment? Yes, Vextar replied. And what I learned was far more valuable than any medical treatment could have been. He began to explain what he had observed. He told them about Minji's compassion, about Jiwan's cooking, about Huna's extra care. He described how the family had sacrificed their own comfort to help someone they believed was suffering. They showed me kindness without expecting anything in return, Vextar concluded. They cared for me not because I am their emperor, but because I am a living being who needed help. But as he spoke, he noticed that his advisors were not sharing his amazement. Instead, they looked uncomfortable. Dr. Valen was frowning. General Korax was shaking his head. Chief Advisor Mortex looked deeply troubled. Your Majesty, Mortex said slowly, you lied to people who were genuinely concerned about your welfare. You allowed them to worry and sacrifice for something that was not real. They wasted their time and resources on a deception, General Korax added. From a military perspective, this shows poor strategy and worse ethics. Dr. Valen was even more direct. You manipulated their emotions for your own curiosity. This is not the behavior of a just ruler. Vextar was confused by their reactions. He had expected them to be fascinated by his discoveries about human nature. Instead, they seemed disappointed in him. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Before anyone could answer, the door opened slightly and Minji's face appeared. Your Majesty, she said quietly. I heard you were awake. I wanted to make sure you were really okay. The advisors looked at each other uncomfortably. Here was the child they had just been discussing. Vextar gestured for her to come in. Minji entered the room and walked straight to him. Her face was bright with relief and joy. I'm so happy you're better, she said. We were all so worried. Mother has been praying every night and Jiwan has been making special foods, and I've been reading you all my favorite stories. She paused, looking at his face more closely. Something in his expression made her smile fade. What's wrong? She asked. You look sad. Are you still sick? Vextar looked at this innocent child who had shown him such pure kindness. He felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Shame. Minji, he said slowly, I have something to tell you. I was not really sick, I was pretending. The little girl stared at him with confusion. Pretending? But why would you pretend to be sick? I wanted to see what you would do if you thought I was hurt and could not see you. Minji's confusion turned to hurt. Her eyes filled with tears. You were testing us. The simple question hit. Vexed her harder than any weapon ever could. Through his telepathic abilities, he felt her pain. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was pure disappointment and betrayal. We were really scared, Minji said, her voice shaking. Mother cried at night because she thought you might die. Jiwan used all her special herbs to make medicine for you. I stayed with you for hours because I didn't want you to be alone. She wiped her eyes, but more tears kept coming. Why would you lie about being hurt? We really cared about you. Before Vextar could answer, Jiwan and Huna appeared in the doorway. They had heard Minji's voice and came to check on her. When they saw their youngest daughter crying, they immediately came to her side. What happened? Huna asked, putting her arm around Minji. Minji looked up at her mother with tear-filled eyes. He was pretending, Mother. The Emperor was pretending to be sick. He was testing us. Huna's face went through several emotions. First surprise, then understanding, then something that looked like deep sadness. Testing us for what, Your Majesty? She asked quietly. Vexitar found it difficult to speak. I wanted to understand human nature. I wanted to see how you would behave when you thought no one was watching. Jiwan stepped forward. Unlike her younger sister, she did not cry. But her voice was firm and disappointed. And what did you learn about us, Your Majesty? I learned that you are capable of extraordinary kindness, Vextar replied. And what did we learn about you? Yuna asked. The question silenced the room. Even the advisors looked uncomfortable. Huna had not raised her voice. She had not shown anger or disrespect, but her simple question revealed the truth that everyone now understood. Vextar had learned about human virtue, but he had revealed his own lack of character. He had tested their honesty with his own deception. He had measured their kindness with his own cruelty. "We served you because we believed you were worthy of service," Huna said, her voice steady but sad. "We cared for you because we thought you were worth caring for. Now we know that our kindness was just part of your experiment." She took Minji's hand and turned toward the door. "Come, girls. His Majesty has learned what he wanted to know about us. There is nothing more for us to do here." As they reached the door, Minji turned back one last time. "I still hope you feel better, Your Majesty," she said through her tears. "But next time you want to know about people, maybe you should just ask. It would hurt less." Then they were gone, and Vextar was left alone with his advisors and the weight of what he had done. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Emperor realized that he was the one who had failed a test. The palace felt different after the truth came out. Word spread quickly among the staff that the Emperor had been pretending to be sick. The reactions were mixed. Some workers felt betrayed, others were confused. But everyone was talking about the human family and their response to the deception. The story that traveled fastest through the palace was about what Minji had said. "Why would you lie about being hurt? We really cared about you." Her simple question was repeated in corridors, in kitchens and in the gardens. Workers from different species found themselves discussing something they had never talked about before: the difference between power and leadership. Vexitar spent 3 days alone in his chambers, not because he was sick, but because he was thinking. The child's words echoed in his mind. Her disappointment had affected him more than any military defeat or political betrayal in his long reign. On the 4th day, he called for Chief Advisor Mortex. "I need to understand something," Vextar said. "Why did the human family's reaction affect me so strongly?" Mortex considered the question carefully. "Perhaps because it was the first time in centuries that someone has been completely honest with you about your behavior." "My advisors are always honest with me. With respect, Your Majesty, we tell you what we think you need to hear to run the Yarayaut Empire effectively. The child told you what she felt you needed to hear to be a better person." Vextar was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think I should do?" "That depends on what kind of emperor you want to be." That evening, Vextar walked to the servants' quarters. This was something he had never done in 300 years of rule. Emperors did not visit servants in their homes, but he was no longer certain about what emperors should and should not do. He found the small apartment where Hyuna lived with her daughters. The door was simple wood, unlike the crystal and gold doors in the main palace. He knocked quietly. Hyuna opened the door and was clearly shocked to see him. "Your Majesty? Is something wrong?" "Yes," Vextar said. "Something is very wrong, and I need your help to fix it." Hyuna stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small but clean and comfortable. Jiwon was at the table doing homework. Minji was on the floor playing with paper dolls. Both girls looked up in surprise when he entered. "I came to apologize," Vextar said. "What I did was wrong. I hurt you by lying, and I used your kindness for my own purposes. I am sorry." Hyuna gestured for him to sit down. The only available chair was small and simple, very different from his throne. "Thank you for saying that, Your Majesty," Hyuna replied. "But I think you need to understand why your test was so hurtful. Please explain it to me." Jiwon looked up from her homework. "We didn't take care of you because you're the emperor. We did it because you seemed to be suffering." "When someone is hurt or sick, you help them," Minji added, not looking up from her dolls. "It doesn't matter who they are. That's just what you do." Hyuna nodded. "In our culture, caring for others is not a test or a choice based on what we might get in return. It's simply our responsibility as beings who share the same universe." Vextar felt like he was learning a completely new language. "In my species, everything is based on power and advantage. Kindness is seen as weakness. Maybe that's why your species rules a galaxy but struggles to be happy," Jiwon said quietly. Her words hit him like a lightning bolt. In all his years of expanding the empire, had he or his people ever truly been happy? They had power, wealth, and control over countless worlds. But did they have what this simple human family had? Did they have genuine care for one another? "What would you do if you were the emperor?" he asked Minji. The 8-year-old finally looked up from her dolls. She studied his face seriously. "I would ask people what they needed instead of telling them what they should want," she said. "And I would make sure that everyone felt safe, not just the strong ones. I would share knowledge between different worlds," Jiwan added. "Each species is good at different things. If they work together instead of just following orders, they could solve bigger problems." Ayuna smiled at her daughters. "And I would remember that being powerful means you have more ability to help people, not more right to use them." Over the next few weeks, something remarkable began to happen. Vextar started implementing changes based on the conversation in that small apartment. He established the first interspecies council, where representatives from different worlds could share knowledge and resources voluntarily, not just follow imperial commands. He created exchange programs where young people from different planets could learn about other cultures. He changed laws that had kept certain species in servant roles, allowing them to choose their own careers and paths. But the biggest change was in how he governed. Instead of ruling through fear and control, he began ruling through service and cooperation. The idea came from watching how the human family had cared for him. They had not served him because they had to, but because they believed service was how you showed care for others. News of these changes spread beyond the palace, beyond Helios Prime, beyond the core worlds of the Empire. Other species began requesting human administrators and advisors. They had heard about the humans who cared for their ruler without expecting anything in return, and they wanted to learn from their example. The transformation was not easy. Many of Vextar's old advisors struggled with the new approach. Some military leaders complained that the emperor was becoming weak, but the results spoke for themselves. Rebellions decreased, trade increased, scientific discoveries accelerated, as different species shared knowledge freely. Dr. Valen conducted studies on the changes and made a fascinating discovery. Planets that adopted human-style compassionate leadership showed improvements in everything from health to productivity to innovation. Care, it turned out, was not just morally superior to fear, it was also more effective. 6 months after his fake illness, Vextar called Minji to his office. She was nervous about the meeting, but she came with her usual brave curiosity. "I have a question for you," he said. "The Galactic Council has approved a new position, Ambassador to New Worlds. This person would visit planets that want to join our alliance and help them understand what we offer. Would you be interested in this job when you're older?" Minji's eyes went wide. "You want me to be an ambassador?" "I want someone who understands that the point of having power is to help others feel safe and cared for. I think you understand that better than anyone. But I'm just a kid, and I'm just a servant's daughter." Vextar smiled. "Those are exactly the reasons why you would be perfect for the job. You see people as people, not as ranks or species or resources. That's what the galaxy needs more of." Minji thought about it seriously. "If I took the job, could I bring my family?" "Of course. And could I make sure that every new planet has schools where all the children can learn together no matter what species they are?" That sounds like an excellent first priority for our new ambassador. Years later, when historians wrote about the transformation of the Galactic Empire, they would mark the beginning of the change with a simple question asked by an 8-year-old. "Girl, why would you lie about being hurt? We really cared about you." The question had revealed something important about both humans and leadership. Humans possessed a kind of strength that came from caring about others without conditions, and true leadership was not about testing people or controlling them. It was about serving them and helping them become their best selves. Vextar ruled for another century after that day, but he was a different kind of emperor. He led not through fear, but through the example he had learned from a servant's daughter. He understood that the measure of a ruler was not how much power they could gather, but how much good they could do with that power. And whenever he faced a difficult decision, he would ask himself a simple question. What would Minji do? Siu. Answer usually pointed him toward kindness, and kindness, he had learned, was the strongest force in the galaxy. The Empire became known not for its military might or its wealth, but for something much more valuable, its compassion. And at the heart of that transformation was the memory of a little girl who had cared for someone simply because he needed care, expecting nothing in return except the hope that he would feel better. In the end, Vexitar's test had taught him the most important lesson of his long life. True strength comes not from the ability to control others, but from the willingness to care for them. And the humans, in their simple, generous way, had shown him that this kind of strength could change, not just individuals but entire civilizations.